The sun hung low over the Texas plains, swollen and red like it had bled too. Dust carried the smell of gunpowder and bridal roses, and in the middle of that ruin stood a woman still wearing her wedding dress, its lace torn, its hem stained dark with blood and mud. The veil clung to her face, a ghost of vows that never came true. Mara didn't cry. Her tears had dried somewhere on the trail behind her, where men's laughter had chased her into silence. She just walked, barefoot and hollow-eyed, until the desert began to hum with the sound of hooves. She froze, clutching the torn fabric at her chest. Out from the mirage rose a rider, tall, bare-chested under a leather sash marked with Comanche beadwork. He slowed his horse, watching her not like a man looks at a woman, but like someone seeing a story he's already heard too many times. When he dismounted, she stepped back, half expecting another command, another hand raised to claim her. Instead, he unstrapped the waterskin from his saddle and held it out. "Drink," he said simply. His English was rough, but careful. She hesitated, staring at the scars that cut across his knuckles. Old, healed, earned. "You one of them?" she whispered. He shook his head. "One of who?" "The men who came through last night." His eyes flicked toward the smoke still rising from the valley below. "No, but I found what they left." She took the water, hands shaking. When she tried to hand it back, he didn't take it. "Keep it," he said. "You'll need it more." She looked down at her dress, the white so ruined it was almost black. "I can't stay like this," she murmured. "They'll see me and know." He studied her for a moment, then said something she didn't expect. "You can wear what you want." The words fell into her like rain. No man had ever told her that before. Not her father, not her husband, not the priest who had blessed her wedding while looking the other way. For the first time in hours, she could breathe. He led his horse to a patch of shade and motioned for her to follow. "The soldiers will come looking," he said. "Rest until then." She sat, the fabric of her ruined gown pooling around her like memory. He didn't ask her name, and she didn't offer it. Somewhere between them, the silence turned from fear into something gentler. Two strangers who both knew what it meant to lose the right to belong. When the wind rose again, carrying the faint sound of thunder, she whispered, "What do I call you?" He looked towards the horizon, the sun cutting his profile into bronze and shadow. "They call me Tahate," he said. "It means quiet wind." She nodded. "I used to be called Mrs. Avery," she said softly, the words tasting strange now. "Maybe it's time I stopped answering to that." He glanced at her then, a faint smile ghosting the edge of his mouth. "Then who are you?" She looked down at her hands, the dried blood flaking away. "I don't know yet." "Good," he said. "Then you're still alive." The next morning came cool and pale, with the kind of stillness that makes even the birds wait before singing. Mara woke under the low branches of a mesquite tree, her dress stiff with dried mud, her body aching from the run that had nearly killed her. Beside the fire sat Tahate, sharpening a blade on a flat stone, his movements slow and patient, like someone who'd learned long ago that silence said more than words. When she stirred, he looked up, his gaze steady but never sharp. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No one will find you today." The word safe felt strange in her mouth when she repeated it, as though it belonged to another life. She glanced at his horse grazing nearby, the animal's coat brushed to a dark gleam, and asked, "Why did you stop for me?" He didn't answer at once. "Because once," he said finally, "someone stopped for me." She watched him for a long time, the way the light traced the scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. "Were you a soldier?" she asked. He shook his head. "A survivor. Same as you." She tried to smile, but her lips cracked instead. "I don't feel like one." "That's how most of us start," he said. He rose and offered her a piece of cornbread from his saddlebag. The gesture startled her. Simple, almost human in a world that had forgotten how to be. She took it, eating slow, her eyes never leaving him. He didn't stare back, only turned toward the wind, closing his eyes as if listening to something distant. "They call this wind the Whisperer," he said. "It takes your name to the hills and brings it back changed." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means whatever you were before don't have to follow you." She looked down at her bloodied gown, at the brown stains where white lace used to be. "And if what I was can't be washed out? Then wear it till it becomes yours again." His words hit her harder than pity ever had. He turned, picking up his bow and quiver. "You can rest here," he said. "I'll hunt. Stay near the fire." "What if soldiers come?" she asked. He paused, looked back at her and said softly, "Then the wind will remember where to find me." She watched him go, his figure cutting through the tall grass like part of the land itself. Alone again, she lifted the edge of her ruined dress, studying it in the light. What had once been shame now looked almost like defiance. The lace fluttered in the breeze, red and white, scar and survival intertwined. She whispered to herself, "Then I'll wear what I want," and for the first time since the altar, her own voice didn't sound like a stranger's. By the time the sun reached its highest point, the desert had begun to shimmer again, and the sound of hooves returned. Not thunder this time, but a steady, cautious rhythm. Mara stiffened, clutching the hem of her ruined gown, her pulse leaping like a trapped bird. Tahate had not come back yet. The fire had burned low, its smoke a thin gray line against the endless blue. She crawled behind a boulder, heart pounding, the water skin pressed to her chest. The riders came in slow. 2 men, both in blue cavalry coats, rifles slung loose across their backs. Their horses snorted as they reined to a stop near the dying fire. "Someone's been here," one said. "Woman's prints, small feet. Might be the one they said ran." The other dismounted, kicking at the ashes. "Tracks head north. Whoever she was, she won't last out here." Mara bit her lip until she tasted blood. She'd seen men like them before. Men who smiled while they ruined you. One of them bent, picking up a scrap of her torn veil that had caught on a thorn bush. He laughed. "Guess she ain't much of a bride anymore." That sound nearly broke her. Then, from beyond the ridge, another sound answered, the low, deliberate neigh of a horse that wasn't theirs. The men turned, hands going to their guns. Before they could draw, Tahat appeared, calm as wind before a storm, bow in one hand, arrow already notched. His horse moved beside him, silent but alert. "You're far from your fort," he said. The older soldier sneered. "And you're far from your reservation." "I go where I please," Tahate said. "You looking for a fight?" "Looking for a runaway," the soldier replied. "White woman. Dirty dress. Maybe you've seen her?" Tahate's face didn't change. "I've seen no woman who belongs to you." "That's not what I asked," the man said, taking a step forward. "You know harboring her makes you a traitor?" Tahat's bow didn't move. "I don't harbor, I protect." The soldier laughed and raised his gun. The sound that followed was fast and final. 1 arrow, 1 shot. The arrow splitting the air so clean it took the hat off the man's head and pinned it to the tree behind him. "Next one finds flesh," Tahate said. The men hesitated only a moment before backing toward their horses. She won't make it long, one muttered. Then that's her choice, Tahate said. They mounted and rode off, the dust swallowing them whole. Only when the sound faded did Mara step out from behind the rocks. Tahat turned to her, eyes sharp but kind. You shouldn't have stayed close to the trail. I didn't mean to, she said, breath shaking. They would have found me anyway. He nodded once. They always do, unless you stop running. And what happens when you stop? She asked. You learn who you are when you're not afraid. He mounted his horse and looked down at her. Come. There's a river east. The land's kinder there. She hesitated, looking back toward the smoke on the horizon, then at her torn, dirt-streaked gown. She climbed up behind him, her fingers gripping his belt. For the first time she realized his horse carried no saddle, only trust. When he nudged the animal forward, the world moved with a strange stillness around them. The wind caught her veil again, lifting it like a flag of something no longer lost but reclaimed. They reached the river by dusk, its water low but clean, winding through the red rock like a scar that never healed but kept shining anyway. Mara slid from the horse, her legs trembling from the long ride, her hands still clutching the folds of her ruined gown. Tahata tethered the horse to a branch, then crouched by the water, washing dust and sweat from his face. The air smelled of sage and wet stone, the kind of smell that told you the land had seen worse and survived it. Mara knelt a few paces away, cupping the cold water to her lips, watching the ripples bend her reflection into something she barely recognized. The woman in the river looked older, harder, but not broken. When she glanced up, Tahate was watching her. You can clean the dress, he said quietly, but you don't have to. It's the only one I have, she replied. Then keep it. Just stop wearing it like a wound. The words made her throat tighten. She wanted to say something sharp, but she didn't. Instead, she dipped the dress into the water, watching the red fade in cloudy swirls that drifted away downstream like ghosts. Did they hurt you? He asked. The question was plain, unsoftened, but not cruel. She froze, fingers still in the water. Yes, she said at last, her voice small but steady. They said I wasn't worth the paper they signed to marry me. I was just... Her voice broke, and she turned away. And you think the river will wash that away? No, she whispered, but maybe it'll forget for a while. He nodded, his gaze tracing the line of the river toward the far hills. Where I come from, he said, we believe water doesn't forget. It carries truth to the sea, where even lies can't float. She looked at him then, really looked, the scars across his arm, the calm in his shoulders, the sadness behind his quiet. And what truth do you carry? She asked. That I once thought hate could feed a soul, he said simply. It only made me hungrier. They sat like that for a long time, the river whispering between them, neither needing to fill the silence. When the moon rose, silver and full, Mara spread the dress across the rocks to dry. The stains didn't vanish, but they softened, blending into the fabric like memory that refused to die but no longer screamed. It's not white anymore, she said softly. Good, Tahat replied. Now it belongs to you. He stirred the fire to life, and for the first time since the altar, she felt the warmth without shame. The river murmured, the wind turned gentle, and somewhere deep in her chest, something she thought was gone began to breathe again. By the third day on the river, peace had begun to feel like a dangerous luxury. The world always remembered what it wanted to punish. Mara sat near the fire, her once white dress now a pale rose from the sun and washing, her hair loose and wild, her eyes calmer but never careless. Tahat was fixing the strap of his bow when he stopped suddenly, head tilting toward the wind. "Riders," he said. His tone was quiet, not afraid, but certain. Mara's heart clenched. "The soldiers?" He didn't answer, just handed her the water skin and motioned toward the thicket by the riverbank. "Go down. Stay low. If I don't return by sundown, follow the water north. You'll find caves before the bend." "You can't face them alone," she whispered. "I can," he said, "but I'd rather not." He met her eyes then. Steady. Human. Not a savior. Just a man who'd made peace with what needed to be done. She hesitated, then nodded and slipped into the brush, her bare feet silent in the reeds. Tahat rose and walked up the slope until the riders came into view. 3 men, 2 in blue, 1 in a brown vest that marked him as neither soldier nor saint. The one in the vest spat as he saw him. "You're far from your kind, aren't you?" "Maybe not far enough," Tahat said. "You seen a white woman? Tall, dark hair, blood on her dress." "I've seen a world full of men who think she belongs to them," he said. The man laughed. "She ran from her husband. That makes her property still." "She ran from a man who forgot what a woman is worth," Tahat said quietly. "That makes her free." The laughter stopped. The man dismounted, hand brushing the butt of his pistol. "I don't take lectures from savages." Tahat didn't move, but his horse did, a single step forward, nostrils flaring, as if the animal itself had heard enough. "Then take advice," Tahat said. "Turn around. The river doesn't forgive what it witnesses." The soldier raised his gun, and for one breath the whole world went silent except for the hum of the current below. The shot came first. Sharp, bright, final, and when the dust cleared, the man's weapon lay smoking in the dirt, his hand split open by an arrow lodged through the trigger guard. Tahat's bow was still drawn, another arrow ready but aimed at the ground. "Go," he said again, calm as the wind. The man cursed, clutching his bleeding hand, but the others hesitated only a moment before hauling him back onto his horse. They rode off without looking back, leaving the echo of pride broken behind them. When the sound was gone, Mara rose from the reeds. Her face was pale, but her eyes were fierce. "You could have killed him," she said. "I didn't need to," he replied. "He'll carry that hand to remind him what happens when you reach for what's not yours." She stared at him a long moment, her breath shaking. "You stood between me and them." "I didn't," he said softly. "I stood between them and the truth." She stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "And what truth is that? That no one owns another soul." The river flowed quietly beside them, carrying the sound of his words like a vow. That night, the wind shifted warm, carrying the scent of cedar smoke and far-off rain. They built a small fire by the river's edge, its glow painting the rocks with amber light. Mara sat cross-legged, her hair catching sparks of gold, her dress now more ember than ash. Tahat sat opposite her, silent as always, mending the leather strap of his quiver. Between them lay a stillness that felt alive, like something listening. For a long time, neither spoke, until Mara said quietly, "When I was a child, my mother told me a woman's name is her armor. My husband took mine the day we married." She looked into the fire, eyes reflecting its burn. "He called me whatever suited him. Doll, fool, curse. I started answering to all of it." Tahat's hands didn't stop moving. "Then stop answering," he said. She gave a small, breathless laugh. "It's not that easy." "It never is," he said, "but it's simple." His words were rough, but the gentleness behind them struck deeper than pity. She studied him through the flame. "And you? Did someone take your name?" "They tried," he said. "The soldiers who came when I was a boy. They said we needed Christian ones. They called me Thomas. I answered once. Why'd you stop? He looked up, his face half lit, half shadow. Because I wanted to live longer than their language. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was sacred. The fire popped, sparks drifting upward like stars that refused to die. Mara reached out, her hand hovering near the flame. If I stop being what they made me, she whispered, who do I become? Whatever the fire makes you next, he said. Fire doesn't destroy. It reveals what was strong enough to survive the heat. She stared into the glow, the words sinking into her like warmth after a long winter. Slowly, she tore the last strip of lace from her sleeve and dropped it into the fire. The fabric curled, darkened, and vanished, leaving only light. Then maybe my name should be something the fire remembers, she said softly. Maybe it already is, Tahat replied. She looked up. What do you mean? He nodded toward her dress. You still wear red. That's not a wound anymore. That's courage. She blinked hard, fighting tears that didn't sting this time. The flames danced higher, painting her face in light and gold. You talk like you see more than most men. I listen, he said. The world tells you what it is if you stop trying to name it first. When the fire burned low, Mara lay back against the sand, the stars bright enough to see without dreaming. Tahate leaned on one elbow, eyes fixed on the horizon. The soldiers will talk, he said. Tomorrow we move farther east. You ready? I think so, she whispered, but I don't want to hide forever. Then don't, he said. Live instead. She smiled faintly, the firelight fading from her eyes. Maybe that's my name, she murmured, her voice soft as the river. Maybe my name is Liv. He didn't correct her. He just nodded once, as if the wind itself had agreed. The morning they rode back into Stillwater, the sky was low and pale, the kind that hides its sun like a secret. Mara's hands trembled against the reins, but she didn't hide them. She wore the same red dress, clean now but still scarred with stains that refused to fade, and her hair was loose like a banner against shame. Tahate rode beside her, calm as ever, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. The town stopped to stare before the horses even reached the well. Whispers spread like wildfire. The runaway bride, the savage who saved her. But no one spoke loud enough to stand by their words. The preacher stepped forward first, thin lips pressed tight. Mara Avery, he said coldly, you left your husband's house in disgrace, and now you return dressed like a harlot beside a heathen. Mara slid down from the saddle, her boots landing in the dust. She didn't flinch. I left a house that wasn't home, she said, and I return as myself. The crowd murmured, half in outrage, half in awe. The preacher's eyes narrowed. You defy the vows made before God. No, she said softly. I honor what they were supposed to mean. His face reddened. And what of this man? Does he speak for you now? Tahate dismounted slowly, his voice even. She speaks for herself. A few men shifted uneasily, hands near their belts. The preacher raised his Bible like a weapon. You'll burn for this. Then I'll burn standing up, she said. The air went still. Even the horses stopped breathing. Tahat took a step closer, his presence quiet but unyielding. Your God must be small, he said. Mine lives in wind, in water, in those who rise when others bow. The preacher sputtered, but no words came. The crowd parted without a sound as Mara turned away from him, her shoulders squared, her steps slow and deliberate. She stopped at the center of town, where a broken cartwheel lay half buried in the dirt, and tore off the last piece of white lace from her sleeve. Holding it high, she let it fall into the dust. "That's all I owe," she said. No one spoke. Not one man stepped forward. Tahate reached for her hand, not to lead her, but to walk beside her, and together they passed through the silence. The sky broke then, light spilling through the clouds like grace long withheld. A child somewhere laughed. The sound spread, faint but defiant. Mara looked at Tahate, her voice steady. "I thought coming back would feel like dying." "It did," he said. "That's how rebirth begins." They rode east that afternoon, the wind at their backs. The dress no longer a symbol of shame, but of survival. Behind them, the town kept its silence. Ahead, the horizon burned gold. And for the first time, she didn't wonder what name to answer to. She just lived. They rode until the road ended, and the prairie opened wide, a sea of grass shimmering beneath a bruised blue sky. There were no fences here, no watchful eyes, only wind and the slow rhythm of two horses breathing side by side. Mara's red dress billowed against the saddle, sunlight catching its worn threads like sparks in motion. She hadn't spoken for an hour, but she wasn't silent. She was listening to the creak of leather, the soft clop of hooves, the way Tahate sometimes hummed under his breath, like the wind carried songs older than words. When they finally stopped at a rise overlooking a vast plain dotted with wildflowers, he dismounted first, helping her down with a touch that was both careful and sure. She looked around, her chest rising as if the horizon itself was something she hadn't known she'd been starving for. "Is this your home?" she asked. "It was," he said. "Then the soldiers came. Now it's just land again." She turned toward him. "And you stayed?" Someone should remember what it was called. He knelt, brushing a hand through the tall grass, his voice barely above a whisper. "This place. My mother said it was where sky and earth met to forgive each other." Mara looked down at the ground, then at the endless blue above. "Maybe that's what I've been looking for." He glanced up at her, his gaze soft. "You've already found it. You just didn't know you could belong here." The wind shifted, lifting her hair across her face. "What if I ruin it?" she asked. "You can't ruin something that forgives." She smiled then, a small, raw thing that still carried tremor, but it was the first smile that reached her eyes. "You talk like you've forgiven everyone," she said. "Not everyone," he answered. "Just myself. Took longer than any fight I ever had." The sky above them darkened into violet, the first stars trembling awake. Mara sat beside him, knees brushing the grass, watching the light fade slow. "When I left Stillwater," she whispered, "I thought I'd never stop bleeding inside." "And now?" he asked. She looked down at her dress, the red deepening in twilight. "Now I think the blood stopped a while ago. I just kept wearing it to remember." Tahate reached out, fingers brushing her sleeve, not to comfort, but to confirm. "You don't have to remember pain to keep your strength," he said. "Sometimes you remember mercy instead." She swallowed hard, blinking fast. "And if I forget that too?" "Then I'll remind you." The last of the daylight caught in his eyes, making them look almost gold. "You can wear what you want, Mara," he said, repeating the words from that first morning. "Even peace." She exhaled, trembling, but smiling through it. Above them, the sky widened, boundless and kind, holding two souls that had already forgiven the world for being cruel. They saw the dust before they heard the hooves. It rose from the west like a ghost, glowing red beneath the dying sun. Tahat stood from where he'd been setting the fire and looked toward the horizon, his jaw tightening. Mara followed his gaze, her breath catching when she saw the riders, 3 of them this time, their silhouettes sharp against the orange sky. "They followed us," she whispered. "They never stopped," he said. He handed her the water skin, his voice calm. "Take the horses east when I tell you. Don't look back." She shook her head, gripping his arm. "I won't run again." He turned to her, the last light drawing lines of gold across his face. "Then stand with me. But remember, fear is the only side that ever loses." The riders closed in, slowing as they reached the rise, their laughter echoing across the open field. The man in front wore a deputy's badge, dulled with dust. "Ain't this a sight?" he sneered. "The preacher says you stole his bride, Redskin." Tahoit's eyes didn't waver. "No one steals what's already been thrown away." "Big words," the deputy said, spitting into the dirt. "Maybe we see if you still talk after she's gone." Mara stepped forward before Tahate could stop her. "You'll touch neither of us," she said, her voice shaking but loud enough to cut through the wind. The men laughed. "Look at her," one jeered. "Still in that blood-stained rag. You ain't fit for a church or a grave." "Then I'll build my own altar," she said. The laughter died, the air snapping tight. The deputy reached for his pistol, but Tahat was already moving. One step, one strike. The man's arm twisted before the weapon left the holster. The gun hit the ground, the sound louder than thunder. The other two reached for their rifles, but they froze when Tahate leveled the pistol not at them, but at the earth between their horses. "No one dies today unless they choose to," he said. His voice was soft, steady, like the hum of a storm before it breaks. The deputy glared, clutching his wrist. "You'll hang for this." "Maybe," Tahate said, "but not today." Mara's gaze burned into the men. "You came here for a woman who stopped belonging to your rules," she said. "So take your laws, take your shame, and carry it back to the town that made you small." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then, without a word, the riders turned their horses. The deputy spat blood, but he didn't look back. They rode west, swallowed by the dusk. When silence finally returned, Mara sank to her knees, trembling from the weight of what hadn't happened. Tahat knelt beside her, his hand hovering near her shoulder but not touching. "You were right not to run," he said. She laughed weakly through her tears. "I didn't stand for courage. I just couldn't bear to lose it all again." "That's where courage begins," he said. The wind rose, carrying the last light of day across the plain, and the red in her dress glowed like the horizon itself, no longer a mark of pain, but a banner of defiance and survival. As the first stars appeared, she whispered, "Will they come again?" Tahate looked east. "They'll come for what they fear," he said, "but they'll find nothing left to take. By the time the night surrendered to light, the world had turned to gold. Mist hung low over the grasslands, soft and silver, and the river whispered through the valley like something grateful to still exist. Mara stood barefoot near the bank, her red dress brushing the dew, her reflection trembling on the water's surface. Behind her, the fire from the night before had burned down to quiet embers, and Tahate stood watching her the way a man watches a sunrise, without claiming it, only honoring that it came. She didn't speak at first. Her eyes followed the current, the same one that had carried away her fear, her shame, her name. When she finally turned, her face was different, calm, unmasked, whole. "Do you think they'll ever stop talking?" she asked softly. "No," Tahate said, "but the wind talks louder." She smiled faintly. "You make it sound like I'm supposed to listen to ghosts." "Not ghosts," he said. "Truth." He stepped closer, holding out something she hadn't seen before. A simple beaded string, worn smooth with age. "It was my mother's," he said. She wore it to remember the people she chose, not the ones she lost. Mara stared at it, her throat tightening. Why give it to me? Because you remind me of her, he said. She used to say the world can break a woman in 2 ways, by taking what she loves or by making her forget she can choose. You chose. Mara took the string, her fingers trembling as she tied it around her wrist. And you? She whispered. What did you choose? He looked toward the rising sun. To stop walking alone. For a moment, neither moved. The wind shifted, catching the edges of her dress. The same dress that had once been an emblem of shame and was now the color of sunrise. Tahate, she said softly. If I stay, they'll call me names again. They'll say I lost my mind. Then let them, he said. You can wear what you want. The words came as gently as they had that first morning, but now they carried the weight of something sacred. She laughed then, tears catching in the corners of her eyes. You think that's enough? It's where enough begins. She stepped closer, her voice trembling but sure. Then I'll stay. He didn't smile, not fully, but his silence deepened, the kind that holds everything words can't reach. Together they watched the sun climb over the ridge, its light turning the river silver and the fields gold. The land seemed to breathe with them, steady, alive. Mara looked down at her reflection one last time, the woman in the water no longer a bride, no longer a victim, but a soul reborn from her own ashes. The river remembers, she whispered. It always does, he said. And as they walked back towards the horses, side by side, the wind rose softly through the grass, carrying their names toward the horizon, not as warnings, but as prayers. Please like, share, and subscribe to support more true-hearted frontier stories on Echoes of the West, where courage meets mercy and the forgotten find their voice again. Would you have faced them too, or hidden until the dawn?